Today, our group, suitably named the Better A Team, is going to be doing a presentation on the business cycle, which can be found in Chapter 47 of our book. Our team members include Jeff, me, Shawin, Aaron, Sirowich, more frequently known as Champ, and I would also like to give a very special thanks to Lucas, as he will be making a few unorthodox appearances throughout our presentation. The things that we're going to be covering today start from the overview of the business cycle, and then we're going to be slowly making our way through the business cycle, starting from the peak, then making our way to the decline, the trough, the recovery, and then finally we're going to be giving a little conclusion to wrap everything that we've covered. So what is the business cycle? The business cycle is the upward and downward movement of gross domestic product, which consists of contractions and expansions that end in peaks and troughs. Contractions refers to the dips, as you can see, and expansions refer to the rise. So now that we have cleared that out of the way, let's start with the peak. What is the peak exactly? And the peak is defined as the highest point of the business cycle, and it's where productivity is at maximum output. And productivity means effectiveness, or the output compared to the time put in. And the peak comes after a period of expansion, or in other words, the rise. And it is also the last stage of the business cycle before the fall, or a decline in economic activity. As with any stage of the business cycle, there are some key indicators, and the peak is associated with financial abundance and arguably happiness, because who doesn't like money? But some more technical indicators are the employment rate. And the employment rate refers to how many people are employed versus how many are unemployed. And if you're employed, it means that you have a job. During the peak stage, the employment rate is high. It is quite high. And this is good not only for the people, but for the government as well, as it makes their spending more flexible because they don't need to provide unemployment services, such as welfare or benefits. And by saving money in these areas, they can use it to develop other areas. Another indicator of the peak stage is the amount of disposable income. Disposable income refers to any amount of money left after spending it on food, water, gas, and taxes. And during the peak stage, people have a lot of disposable income, so they can splurge quite a bit, and they may spend it on holiday packages, toys, gadgets, and these purchases, they boost the economy even further and stimulate even more economic growth. So how does this affect the average person? Because we're all average people. Let's take a look with our example. So here we have Lucas, our average bro. And as you can see in this picture, he's having a mighty great time on this holiday package that he purchased. So he used his abundance of disposable income to buy himself a good time. This is also evident in this picture as he's making way to the Apple store to make even more purchases. And of course, he's spending a rather major proportion of his disposable income on gym memberships because he likes to take care of his health. Basically, people during the peak, they do not worry about their financial situation at all. There is an abundance of wealth, and arguably everyone is happy because they have money, they can do whatever they want. However, this is kind of a double-edged sword. Too much economic growth? Yes, that actually exists. So the more money there is, the higher demand there is. So the more money people have, the more they will want to buy products, the more they want to spend it, which in turn increases production. So manufacturers, they have to hire more people and employ more resources. And this drives the price up and is referred to as inflation. So inflation is the increase in the average prices of goods and services. This is categorized as economic growth, but there comes a point where production fails because it cannot meet the ever-increasing demand. So people will want to buy a product, but basically there's no product there because they can't make it in time, and which leads to an overheated economy. So what do we do? In any country where an overheated economy is becoming a problem, central banks will increase interest rates to lower consumer borrowing and consumer spending. So consumer spending refers to the total money spent on final goods and services by individuals and households for personal use and enjoyment in an economy. So by increasing interest rates, that could be like credit cards or loans, it will maybe make people less inclined on borrowing money from the banks. And this will slow down the economy, but it also leads to a decline, which brings us to the next section.
The decline. Economic downturn is what signals the end of the peak for the business cycle. It is during this phase that the economy will pull back or fall from the heights created during the peak. This may come as small market corrections or as larger crashes and downturns in the form of recessions, or even further still as a depression. While economic declines may be caused by many different reasons, today we will be looking at a few key factors. Increasing interest rates imposed by the central bank, falling housing prices, volatility in the stock market, and black swan events like COVID-19. Firstly, let's look at the effect of increasing interest rates on the economy. As we have shown previously, during the peak of an economic boom, consumer spending and demand is usually very high. This trend creates a rapid rise in inflation, and if left unchecked, can be very detrimental to the economy and the country itself. So the central bank often steps in to raise interest rates to counteract the inflation. This is due to the fact that when interest rates become higher, it is beneficial for consumers to save their money to capitalize on the higher rates of return on their interest. This in turn causes less consumer spending, effectively curbing inflation. The adverse effect of this, however, can be the cooling or downturn of the economy. Secondly, the correlation between housing markets and the business cycle of the economy is something that economists have always kept a close eye on. When housing prices are high, consumers have increased confidence, and they can often be seen remortgaging their homes to take advantage of their increased equity. Alternatively, when housing prices fall, homeowners tend to revert back to saving and show a reduction in consumer borrowing. It is during times of low housing prices that consumer spending is also low, which can further deepen the economic contraction. Furthermore, the stock market is an ever-changing entity that creates or destroys consumer confidence in the economy's strength. The average individual draws a direct correlation between the current status of the stock market with the strength of the economy. While this is often a true indicator to the economic situation of a country, there are many nuances in which the average consumer knows little about. It is this sentiment, however, that can bring about an economic downturn or make a small correction become a deep crash. When the average consumer or investor sees the stock market beginning to contract, the most common response is fear. This creates a sudden surge of stock selling as these novice investors attempt to protect their funds. In actuality, what may have been a simple correction in the market now becomes a full-on crash as the waves of selling further deepen the stock prices falling. It is this domino type effect that often draws down an economy from an economic downturn into a full recession stage. Lastly, one key, often unseen factor to economic downturn is the emergence of what are called black swan events, meaning a rare or uncommon event that comes about to disrupt the economy. Such events include the housing crash of the financial crisis, and most recently the Great Lockdown, as it is being called, of COVID-19. The COVID lockdown has created the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression in America. It has disrupted supply chains and entire economic structures of whole nations, to which some of the effects are yet to be fully recognized. These events are unseen catalysts that can blindside an otherwise healthy economy and plunge it into collapse. It is often these events that have the greatest and longest lasting effect on the well-being of the economy and financial markets as a whole, and they can often be seen leading to recession or even depressions in their respective economies. For the average consumer, recession times mean little or no disposable income, reduced spending, possibly low savings as well, as their income may dwindle or even be eliminated due to unemployment. Recessions, being a prolonged state of decline in the economy, are often difficult to climb out of and if a country is not careful, it can worsen into a depression, which is essentially the same thing as a recession, just a much longer and deeper decline. It is here where lawmakers might consider increasing government spending, or the central banks might consider stimulating the economy. Eventually, however, no matter how deep the decline is, it will hit a bottom. This is what we call the trough.
Troughs are important as they mark a positive turning point for the economy's business cycle. It's when it hits the bottom, transitioning from contraction phase to expansion or recovery phase. Other words for contractions would be decline, decrease, and shrink. And for expansion, it would be growth, extension, and development. Troughs are recognizable in hindsight, but harder to spot in real time. However, there are several key indicators of where the economy stands in the business cycle. Firstly, the jobs market. Just like it was mentioned earlier, it's the employment levels, how many people are in employment and how many are out of work or unemployed. When unemployment rate rises from month to month, the economy has most likely entered a contractionary phase. If it reaches a trough or bottoms out, a trough has likely occurred. And when something bottoms out, it refers to something that has reached the worst point possible, and things can only get better from that point. Decreases in wages or disposable income is another indicator of where the economy stands in the business cycle. Disposable income is, once again, what people have available to spend after buying essentials such as food, electricity, gas, etc. In other words, it's the income remaining after deductions of taxes and other mandatory charges. However, during the trough, households have less money to spend and save, which then forces consumers to consume less and become more conscious in their usage of income. This decrease in consumption could then decrease corporate sales and corporate earnings, decreasing the value of individual stocks. And decreases in individual share price valuations could then lead to market-wide value decrease. So the last indicator is obviously the business closures and financial markets, including the stock market for company shares. Declines in financial and stock market foreshadow contraction in the economy. Retail sales or consumer spending, how much people are spending in the shops, decline. This is also related to consumer borrowing, how much people have borrowed in loans or on their credit cards. While troughs vary in severity, they are overall typically marked with the total value of exchange rates of higher unemployment, low disposable income, low consumer borrowing, and declining business sales and earnings from closures in financial and stock market. If these economic indicators contract, the economy is likely in a contraction phase, which can last for a short or long period of time. However, as the economy activity become to increase again, as shown on the economic indicators, that expansion is likely underway and a trough has been put in. So now for your better understanding, here we've got Lucas again. During the trough, as Lucas has been through difficult times of financial depression, he has become obese and bald. Losing his job and homeless, there is nowhere left to fall. Since this is the trough, this is his rock bottom. And as the economic situation is in harsh recession, the unemployment rate rose, and those lucky enough to have jobs were only able to work part-time during this period. Along with majorities, Lucas is in difficulties of trying his best ways of finding his job to gain back his peaceful life. Now, next sections, we have recovery.
Recovery. Recovery is the period after the trough when economic growth or the economic activity starts to pick up or get better. The potential and the actual output of a country increases to reach the highest point, the peak, over time. During this period, expansion, the phase of the business cycle where the GDP increases, occurs. Expansion is driven by two factors, internal and external. Internally, the economy adapts to new changes and policies set out by the central bank and the government as a reaction to a trough. The government may use fiscal policy which spend or cuts taxes or both. The central bank, moreover, may use monetary policy to stimulate the economy. As a result, people spend more money when the bank sets lower interest rates. Also, it will be cheaper to take out a loan to buy certain things, such as houses, cars, or more. The central bank may also reduce credit card interest rates. With this lower, people are more confident and willing to buy more products, causing the economy to grow more and expand. External factors. During this period, unemployment decreases as more and more people find jobs. As a result of earning more money, consumer spending continues to increase. Because consumers are more confident in spending money, goods and services are produced more to meet demands. People are more confident to go shopping or to travel to local area of the country. This allowed the GDP to grow since more money is spent in the economy. It is during this time that our consumer will become more confident in his situation. He will begin to spend on non-essential products again and become more confident in his financial security over time. Then let's head on to conclusion.
So, in conclusion, the business cycle is one of booms and busts, or peaks and troughs. Many factors contribute to this pattern of ups and downs, as you have seen, and while some economists believe it is possible to stop this cycle from repeating altogether, all attempts to do so have not yet been successful. So we hope you enjoyed our presentation today on the business cycle, and if you have any questions, ask them now. Thank you for your attention. Bye-bye.